Good evening, and welcome to the inaugural Michael Rawlings Endowed Lecture. I'm Jim Falk, President of the World Affairs Council of Dallas-Fort Worth. Mike's guest, Rahm Emanuel, was mayor of Chicago from 2011 to 2019, following his service as President Obama's White House Chief of Staff. His recent book, The Nation City, Why Mayors Are Now Running the World, makes a strong case for the vitality of local governance in an age of dysfunction. Joining him in the conversation, of course, is our mayor, former mayor, Mike Rawlings. Now, you can purchase a copy of The Nation City, Why Mayors Are Now Running the World, by going to your local bookstore. Here in Dallas, we go to interabangbooks.com. And our viewers know that by typing in the code dfwworld, you can get a 10% discount, not just on The Nation City, but any books that you might have in your shopping cart. If you'd like to support your independent bookstore in your own town, just go to bookshop.org. This lecture was really the inspiration of one of our council's most dynamic directors, Lucy Billingsley. She saw it as a way to honor Mayor Rawlings in 2019 when he received our council's highest honor for his distinguished service. That's the Neil H. Mallon Award. The founding donors of the Michael Rawlings Endowed Lecture are Billingsley Company, the Beck Group, Crow Holdings, Hall Group, Tim Headington, and Headington Companies, as well as KDC Real Estate Development and Laura and Jack Matthews. Additional support has been provided by Doug Chestnut, Jill and Michael Dardick, Frank Milopoulos, Herb Weitzman, and Abigail and Todd Williams. Let me remind all of you that you can keep up with programs at the World Affairs Council of Dallas by subscribing to our YouTube channel. And of course, you can find that at DFW World. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend, Mike Rawlings. He's a graduate of Boston College with a degree in philosophy. He's the founding partner of the private equity firm CIC Partners, and he's now vice chairman over there. But what we're celebrating tonight is his commitment to his hometown, Dallas, Texas. For a variety of reasons, the mayor of Dallas rarely serves a full 2 terms. In fact, when Mike left in 2019, he'd been in office longer than any mayor since R.L. Thornton, and that was 58 years ago. Mike Rawlings saw our city through some extremely challenging times. I'm sure you remember them. The Ebola scare of 2014, the tragic shooting in 2016, which resulted in the deaths of 5 police officers. Throughout all of this, he kept our city together and inspired us to be the very best. To give those of you who may not know him a better sense of why he's so admired, I'd like you to consider this excerpt from a speech he gave to the nation on the 50th anniversary of President Kennedy's assassination in 2013. Mayor Rawlings said, "JFK and our city will forever be linked. In tragedy, yes. But out of that tragedy, an opportunity was granted to us, the chance to learn how to face the future when it's darkest and most uncertain, how to hold high the torch even when the flame flickers and threatens to go out. As the people of Dallas did then, each of us must meet our ongoing challenges head on with courage, honoring but not living in the past, and never flinching from the truth." Those are certainly good words for us to remember today. Mike, we look forward to your conversation with Mayor Emanuel.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to have anything named after you, and especially something to do with the World Affairs Council. I want to thank all the folks that and endowed this series. And I want to thank you, Jim, for your leadership of the council. Sorry we can't do this in person to the audience, and I would love to do it next year and get to see a lot of friends and really struggle with some of the issues we're dealing with in the world. But I am so excited and so honored to have our first guest on this series, Rahm Emanuel. We met, we were elected the same year in 2011 and served 8 years together, knew each other through the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and different issues that we faced from time to time. Rahm was born in Chicago and ended up being the mayor of Chicago, which is a great moment of a poetic license, if you will. But he is a true politician. He's done it for years. He was a senior advisor to Bill Clinton. He was a congressman from Illinois in the 5th District. He was the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. And then, as Jim said, was the chief of staff to Barack Obama and then became mayor. He is now an ABC News contributor to This Week. He's a senior counselor to Centerview Partners, an investment banking firm. And he is the author of The Nation City, Why Mayors Are Now Running the World, which, by the way, Rahm, I've got to tell you, I'm very frustrated because I wanted to get the book and show it to everybody, and it's sold out in all the bookstores in Dallas. Okay,
my mother must have ordered them.
Good for you, and that's a sign that somebody still reads in the United States, and you've got a good story to tell. I've got a personal confession though, and being mayor, is that we all kind of, mayors compete with one another. And I use Chicagoland as a whipping boy from time to time because, see, DFW is the 4th largest metropolitan area in the United States behind Chicago. So who do you go after? You go after the next line. And I would always predict in 2030, 2035 that we would be overtaking Chicago. So thank you for providing me that moment in many speeches that I made.
Well, the good news, it never happened on my watch. That's somebody else's problem down the road.
Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, long story short, I want to have a conversation with you today. Thanks for coming on. And for the audience, what I thought we'd do is kind of talk about current events, things that are happening right now, then turn to the theme of your book and you personally as a leader, get a little personal with you because you're a fascinating leader in the United States, and I appreciate the role that you've set. And then copter back up and talk about the nation and where it stands in the world right now. But let's just kind of start with the election, if you don't mind. What was the aha that you got out of the election about America? The insight, maybe it was a surprise, maybe it was you knew it all along and you were confirmed. For me, it was, I always knew America was in the center, but it felt like I saw a little click to the right, even though that President-elect Biden won. It felt a little more conservative than I thought. What about you?
Well, I think there's I'm still unpacking it. For the truth is, I think there's a number of things that we learned. And I think that one takeaway, a lot of people all take away that, America's unbelievably divided, and so on and so forth. And I think when you get beyond the personalities, Florida votes for Donald Trump, but 60% of the people voted to increase the minimum wage. Missouri voted for Donald Trump and voted to expand Medicaid to the uninsured. Illinois votes for Joe Biden and votes down a progressive income tax. California votes overwhelmingly for Biden and Harris, and yet on both affirmative action in places of employment, worker protections for gig employees, and those are they voted those down. Those are 2 big progressive initiatives, and I would say life is complicated, and not so much that it's in the ideological center, but for a governing strategy, you can look at those things and say a state that votes, quote unquote, for a Republican president can embrace a progressive idea. A state that votes for a progressive president can reject a progressive idea. And I think that I think if I was the Biden operation today, I would use those as a model as you construct your legislative agenda, how to navigate these treacherous waters between progressive ideas with a Republican Senate. So that's one. 2, the vote on the presidential is clearly a vote for Biden and against Trump. 2 facts. Joe Biden is the only person elected a president with the least coattails of any person since World War II. He's the first Democratic president since 1884 not to have a majority in the Senate. You have to go back to 1884. So that tells you something there. Third, there's a lot of takeaways between the 5 states that flipped from 2016 to 2020. And one of the biggest takeaways is what happens in the suburban areas, not so much the urban areas. And it's an affirmation of what I call this new metropolitan majority. If you really look at the difference between 2016 and 2020, 2016, the suburbs aligned with rural America. In 2020, the suburbs aligned with urban America. The end of the result. Fourth, and I was on the other side of this, I said there's no way Donald Trump can govern from a very, very narrow path, never expand his coalition, and then try this idea that you're going to turn out 20 million Trump-like voters who didn't vote before, but you get him to vote again. And he damn near pulled it off. And so while I find him, and it's not a surprise to anybody listening, I find him a venal person in the sense of the way he conducts himself and the way he conducted in the office. That said, you have to politically admire everything he did politically without saying about him. Fifth, my own takeaway, there's some things that I think that nurture that assumptions like the one I just said about Donald Trump turning out 20 million more people than didn't vote in 2016. There's some assumptions about the Democratic coalition that you're going to have to evaluate going forward. Like the notion, when you look at the African-American vote, et cetera, it didn't turn out and Biden did not do better than Hillary, and yet you had a person of color on the ticket. So I'm not so sure, especially also in Texas with the Latino vote, I'm not so sure the Democratic perception of or assumption of identity politics really plays out the way we would hope it does. And for 20 years, because of its original work in 2003, that demographics were going to be destiny. That's true, and we better figure out, but inverse of what we hope.
Right.
We better start understanding how to talk to working class voters since we assume we represent them. And the fact is they're not, we've offered them free college, free healthcare, et cetera, and they're not coming. I think voters are more than the culmination of their wallet. There's a whole cultural language and attitude, and we're not coming across correctly on that. We're out of sync.
So you see,
I mean, that's a lot to unpack, but I was trying to get in.
No, that's good. That's good. You see, you painted a picture here of not a clear line of divide in this country. It was kind of more of a dovetail. There are breaks, but sometimes they go this way and sometimes they go this way. President-elect Biden ran on this notion of uniting the country. We're tired of all the angst and the pain and the argument, and it's all come together, if you will, to quote the Beatles. Can he do it? I mean, is this country ready for uniting, or are we too divided in some manner?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One is, for the last year and a half, and I've written about this, that Democrats were angry at Trump. Swing voters were exhausted by Trump. Those are not the same emotion. And Joe Biden, by talking about unity, coming together, and his own character and authenticity around that message, was exactly what you needed to get X amount of voters to leave Trump and vote for Joe Biden. That wouldn't have been true about the other 18 people that ran for the nomination. There's plenty of things you can point to that are divisive in America. The truth is those divisions and that divisiveness have existed. We've never had a president who's exacerbated them. That wasn't true. Those divisions existed with Lincoln. He tried, and I'm rereading another book that just came out. I'm a amateur Lincoln historian. Those divisions existed under Roosevelt and got exacerbated. That's why you had Father Coughlin, Huey Long come up in those eras. So we've always had those divisions, but we've always been fortunate in American history to have presidents who sought a way to find where that foundation of commonality was. I actually think you could actually see that today, not just by going through data sets on the election, but look, 68% of the American people support immigrants who live here becoming citizens and earning the right to that. Today, we have a net 2/3 still support free trade and exporting. So you can find places of unity, and the job of the president, and to be honest, the job of a citizen. It's not hard to find either geographic, racial, cultural, or economic differences. The job for all of us and the president to lead us in this effort is to find the threads that bring us together. And I still think there's enough common agreement on that. And I think one of the things that will benefit Biden, that people don't, now they know it's not theoretical what happens if you don't try to find that common ground. And while it's been stressed, one of the things I would do, Barack Obama did this in the first year. I would go even more, he signed into law. If I was Biden, I would double the ante on a universal national service bill. I think one of the ironies.
You think that would bring people together?
Well, I think this, yeah, Mike, I think this, I have 3 kids. One son graduated UCLA, joined Navy. He's Navy Intel. Just a month ago, went to Pusan. I have a daughter, senior at Brown, and a junior at Princeton. I am shocked at how civically engaged their cohort of friends are. Now, I think they pick good people as friends, but I don't think Donald Trump intended this. But there's a level of civic engagement at all levels and ages that we have not seen in 30 years. I think one of the things we could do as a country is tap that. Especially, I think every child should form at least 6 months of some form of service, whether you want to attack literacy, you want to attack mentoring in some way. We do this in Chicago. To graduate high school, you have to do 40 hours of community service. I think if we had a national effort under the rubric of unity and bring the country together to ask this generation to contribute to the country 4 months. Pick whatever time frame you want. And that before you go to college, which clearly is only going to be a Zoom experience anyway, 4 months of service to your country. If you go longer, we'll pick up more of your college costs, et cetera, et cetera. I think you'd be amazed of the well and how deep it goes of kids that want to do that. Yeah. And I think, to tell you the truth, a kid from the inner city of Chicago working alongside a student from the suburban area of Dallas, next to another student from Oklahoma, next to another person from Idaho, you'll find out that they have a hell of a lot more in common than they do differences, even though they were born in different locations. And I think that we would be well served as a country doing that.
Going back to this divide issue, and that's a good example of how you bring people together. At the local level, look, you make a point that why mayors are running the world. Yeah. You have the world in your own city. I mean, not only demographically, but geographically, they come from every place. You deal with the issues that everybody's dealing with around the globe. Talk about being mayor now as a uniter, and you had some tough times on that issue. I mean, this whole issue of public safety versus Black Lives Matter and how you deal with race and economic divide. It's a tough road out there as a mayor.
Well, I'll give you a couple things. Well, look, it's never, unless the economy's booming, it's never really easy. So look, in Chicago public schools, and I'm really, really proud of this, we have 146 languages spoken. So it is kind of a reflection of the globe. Now, when I ran, we had the shortest school day and the shortest school year in the United States of America. Out of 7,000 school districts, we were dead last. That's hard to do. A child in Chicago got 5 hours and 30 minutes of education. So we added an hour and 15 minutes every day, 2 weeks to every year. We made kindergarten full day for every child, which did not exist. We made pre-K full day for every child in the city of Chicago. And then we were the first city ever if you got a B average in high school, we made community college free. Books, tuition, and transportation, and the first public scholarship in America that allowed dreamers to get public assistance. And 84% of all the kids, about 15,000 already have done it, were the first ones in their family to go post high school. So we added 4 years of educational time to kids. And according to Stanford, we were the #1 in growth in reading, math scores, and high school graduation and college attendance in the United States of any urban school system. Now, to me, that was a way of, and the biggest growths were among minority children. I mean, the biggest jump in high school graduation, the biggest jump in college attendance, etc. And we just finished, and I want to give one a shout out, and it doesn't always count money. I decided 4 years ago to get your high school diploma, you would have to show a letter of acceptance from either college, community college, a branch of the armed forces, or vocational ed, or you couldn't get your walking papers. We just completed our first year. 97.5% of all kids graduating had a post-high school plan. And in a city where a lot of kids don't know if they're going to live to 21, to then start asking the question, where am I going to be at 21? That's a game changer. And that, to me, is how you kind of bring a city together and bring unity. Now, to the issue of public safety, you know, like every city, it's not unique. Over-policing is a problem. But I would suggest, given what you and I are seeing and all of us are seeing around the country in urban areas with the spike in shootings and violence, under-policing is not a panacea either, because the vice lords, the gangster disciples, and the Latin kings, they will police. It ain't gonna be pretty. So between like this extreme over-policing, which has real fundamental problems, and police pulling way back, there are ways to do de-escalation, mental health, but I'll give you one thing about bringing people together. In our change, we found out, it's a small thing, but it contributes to opening people's eyes, which is part of what you're trying to do. People in a community see past a badge and a gun, and officers see beyond a hood, etc., and outfits. And our wardrobe doesn't become a uniform. So every officer in Chicago had to go for at least a day to the Holocaust Museum for a day of education. That existed under my predecessor. Well, Chicago has a rich history, and we have a wonderful, on the south side near University of Chicago, museum called the DeSable Museum, which is a history of African Americans in both Chicago but in America. So the superintendent and I said, if we're going to go to the Holocaust Museum, which should happen, why don't we also add an additional day where you go to DeSable Museum and open your eyes to the experience as part of your requirement to become a Chicago police officer? And that was also a cultural exchange that allowed people a different language, a different experience, and a different sensitivity. It was a small thing, but there's a lot of different things you can do. A lot of challenges come around mental health. The truth is you should have squads that are both EMT and police, or since you and I both pay officers more for more training, besides becoming an officer, what if you became an officer with a certificate in EMT? So you didn't approach it from a law enforcement perspective, but you approached it from a public health perspective. It's a different outlook. We included in all our 911 officers, dispatch officers, mental health training. Because the first contact is a family member calling 911. And that officer, being sensitive to what they're hearing, doesn't automatically call the police. That this may be, you deploy a rapid deployment force out of the EMT, because they don't approach it from a law enforcement. They approach it from a health perspective, which is a holistic approach. There's a lot of different things. And look, this is a work in progress constantly. You don't hit an end point. It's a lifetime of training, a lifetime of improvement, where you just get better at it all the time.
That technique is something that we use in Dallas as well. We realize so much of these things with mental health. The question is spending and how much it costs to send those mental health workers with it. You know,
can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yeah, please.
there's a cost if you don't send them.
I agree.
And
I
so you
agree.
just got, President Kennedy, since I saw the early, had a great quote. I used to say that President Clinton, President Obama, to govern is to choose. And so you got to weigh equities. Which one do you have? Or the other quote he had, to governing is choosing between bad and worse. And you just got to decide which one's which.
We've got our cities are combined too. The chief of police that reported under me, David Brown, Mayor Lightfoot just hired 9 months ago. He came out of retirement to go play in Chicago. So I hope that's going well.
Yeah. I'm not sure he would use the metaphor play.
No, I know, but that's what I told him. I said, you can't get off the field. He wants to get back on the field in that regards. I will tell you, it's easier being a mayor in Chicago in some ways, okay? Because you have much more direct accountability with your school district and public safety. In Dallas, we have a city council form of government, and it's a little tricky in that way.
Yeah, I mean, for the viewers, so in Chicago, the mayor not only has control of the police, fire department, all the neighborhood services, the airport, the second largest community college system in the United States of America, the second largest library system in America, the second largest public transportation in America, the second largest public housing in America, and the second largest park system in America. The mayor appoints the president, executive director, or whatever, and the entire board. Obviously, city council has to confirm, but they all report. And so it's a $19.5, $20 billion budget all in.
Right.
7 corporations, but the mayor it's clearly a strong mayor system, and obviously the public schools as well.
Yeah, one of the things we miss in Dallas, I think, is having that leadership on education. We're making a lot of progress in Dallas, but the progress I think Boston made, DC made, Chicago's made is because you guys took this thing on.
You guys should really, some of your colleagues and my colleagues when we were mayors, I encouraged them to do, I said, I wouldn't run if it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
And I do know from Sean Reardon at Stanford, who came in and studied, and there was a big New York Times story about it. We made one data point set. So when I walked in, 1/3 of the children were reading and math at grade level. When I walked out, 2/3 of all Chicagoans, regardless of race, background, were doing reading and math at their grade or better. And when 84% of all your kids are poverty or below, in 8 years,
Congratulations.
And that's worth all the brain damage of being mayor.
It really is. And when people say we can't make change in this area, I say you're wrong. We can make it if we do it right. So my hat's off to you. You love being mayor. I saw someplace you said it was the best job you've ever had.
Job. Yeah.
Compare and contrast that between that and being chief of staff for President Obama. I mean, that's a hell of a job too.
Well, let me back up. One is, in my analysis in public life, there are 5 great jobs: president of the United States, governors of California and New York, or mayor of New York or Chicago. I think I've had 1.5 of these jobs. So no, but I'll tell you why it's better. Not just because of the power. Like when the Chicago Star Scholarship, an idea I had that I talk about in the book, 84% of the 12,000 plus kids, first ones in their family, go to college. And when I used to always do the graduation. And when these kids who got to be average, and they went for free, and the joy in the parents' face, the way they would hug and kiss, and they said that I had to make a decision whether one child went to college and one didn't. You relieved me of that, and you touch, as I say in the book, when you're mayor, it's not a theoretical discussion. You know how the policy, and you don't get that as chief of staff. That's your high. The difference when you've created, University of Chicago just came out with a study that our universal pre-K what used to be an exclusively white, high-income education now became universal in Chicago. That personal joy you don't get as a congressman or a chief of staff. On the other hand, you get all the lows. And I mean, I've been in hospitals with police officers. I've been in hospitals with a mother and a grandmother and their son or daughter who's a victim of gun violence. And all you got is a hug to offer. So it's all the highs and all the lows. And it's real. And if you're going to do this, the truth is, and while I'm honored to have been President Obama's chief of staff and President Clinton's senior advisor, all the highs and lows are theirs. And, as he's signing healthcare bill, you're back at your desk moving on the next one. And so the mental reward and emotional reward is just a step back. Now, I used to say in the White House, thank God it's Friday, 2 more work days till Monday. Right. So, it's just a better job. It's just, and you get to, now you guys have got a park with a river. I have one. I used to, when I was walking back to the office, I used to walk along my river walk that we built, and I used to say, when I'm down here, I said this to my security, everybody's, hi, Mr. Mayor, thanks. You go up on the sidewalk. Like, yeah, go to hell, you asshole. And I said, I'm gonna stay down here. Everybody's happy next to the water, And so you get all the highs and you get all the lows.
That's what kind of living's all about. You've got, you're obviously a successful leader. Compare and contrast Obama's style and leadership style and yours. I mean, because you're very different sort of guys. You're not policy-wise, but the way you approach things. I mean, you roll up your sleeves and you kind of dig into it, and he's a little more cerebral, I guess.
Well, I haven't read it, but I've read enough reviews about President Obama's book. I think one of his strengths.
Yeah, was he trying to take the business away from you, putting his book on top of it?
So what I do think, though, is, and I saw this firsthand as chief of staff, he has a capacity to both be in the moment and outside looking in. It's a real talent. And I think for what I can tell gleaming from the reviews, that comes across, and he's an excellent, beyond being just a very capable writer, the ability to both be in the moment and almost a drone flying above it and observing it. I'm a middle child. I used to say to my mother, you love Ezekiel more than you love me. She goes, no, I hate you all equally. That was what my mother used to say. And I can't. If I'm in there, I'm in. And I can't kind of step away and get that kind of distant perspective, etc. And I think, his experience is different growing up with a different family background from, my father just passed away. He doesn't have that relationship. So we're emotionally different. I'm a middle child of an immigrant family with 2 brothers on either side. And I just think that background is different, and how we, came to Chicago is different. And he is able to step back. I don't have that either intellectual or emotional. I can see a moment. I can take a wide lens view. I can look around the corner, but I don't have the emotional distance. I'm a hot-blooded Israeli kid.
That's interesting. It's fascinating. Are you going to get back in the game with President-elect Biden? And by the way, what did AOC do to you to draw a line in the sand that you can't be in the cabinet?
Well, I don't care about it. I mean, here's the thing. I'll always support. Joe's a good friend. I'll support him in or out. Unlike mayor or Congress or anything, I wanted to do those, etc. I think I would help in doing that. My life is not determined by doing that in the way it was over the last 30 years of public life. I do think, having been mayor, having been chief of staff, I have a unique perspective that could help.
Yeah, you do.
Right. That said, and as that's how I look at it. I'm not going to, given that we have an open line, I'm not going to say my other view on everything else.
Okay, I will.
I'm showing a rare moment. It's a very rare moment of restraint.
I won't. But it's just interesting for the Democratic Party because, I feel a little alienated too, because, I've been a Democrat my whole life, but I'm a kind of a pro-business centrist. I believe progressive thinker, but I catch shit from everybody on stuff like that.
But look, here's my thing. We have a virus that's out of control. We have an economy that's starting to actually slip a little, and it's slipped for a long time, for at least last year, for a lot of people with on the lower end of the economic ladder. I'm the least of the problems.
That's right.
Okay, there's a lot. Mitch McConnell, whatever those are a lot. There are a lot. There's no shortage of crises. As I used to say, if you turn 360, anywhere you look, there's a crisis. I'm not the crisis.
Yeah. Well put. Well put.
But the other way I look at it, let me say this.
What?
There's a lot of people in our party who celebrate diversity as a great thing, except for when it comes to the party.
Right. Yeah, I always say the question is how you define diversity. Okay, can you really do that? You have a background that is Jewish. I mean, you were a dual citizen till 18, I think I read, right?
I was born in America. I was not. My dad was from Israel.
Okay, your dad was from Israel.
Yeah, I was born in Chicago.
Are you a practicing Jew today?
Yeah. My rabbi doesn't think so, but I do. So this also. And
I guess I wanted you to talk a little bit about the role that faith plays in America today.
I'm a big look. We have unfortunately a moment of secularism, and while I grew up in a home that was adamant about separation of church and state, given the history in the United States, we were very observant Jews. My dad's from Israel. My mother comes from a Eastern European Jewish family that immigrated to America and Chicago specifically, 1914, leaving the pogroms of Eastern Europe. And we practice in our home, and I set this up when I got elected to Congress. Every Friday night was Sabbath, no discussion, no public schedule. Every Sunday night was a family dinner, and Monday and Wednesday or Thursdays was a family dinner, and then 3 breakfasts a week when the kids were going to school I had with them, and then a holiday at the end. But we went to synagogue. We went to a modern Orthodox synagogue, even though I would describe my faith as more in the between Reformed conservative and Orthodox conservative. We just love the rabbi at this modern Orthodox, and I grew up in a very observant Jewish home, and I don't think I would. There's a word in the Jewish faith called tzedakah, which is to give and to make the world whole, not just financially give, but to give of oneself and make the world whole. And I do believe in the responsibility that the Jewish faith teaches, that if you save one life, you've saved the world. And that public life is about fulfilling that concept without, obviously, in a predominantly Catholic faith city, you can't do that. I'm not trying to impose Judaism, but I would say that both the Jewish history, the Jewish culture, and the Jewish faith have very much influenced my sense of purpose in public life, and that is of tzedakah. And and then I've raised all the kids, Amy and I. And look, my name is Rahm Emanuel. It's not like you can get away from it. But my son, when he was bar mitzvah, we did it in Israel. When my middle daughter was bar mitzvah, we did it in Prague at a synagogue. That was one of the surviving ones of the war. And when Leah was bar mitzvah, I took her on a trip to Israel as part of her. So I'm very identify that and proud of it, and it's influential to the way I think of the world and my purpose in it.
my background is Christian, but it's been very important to me throughout my whole life and as I've approached it. Moving from the soul to the globe, I mean, does that impact your view of Israel and the Arab world? I mean, President Obama caught some grief for not being pro-Israeli enough. Okay,
Well, I mean, I don't know.
what should we be
David,
doing?
well, look, David Axelrod and Rahm Emanuel were his two top
I know
advisors.
exactly.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, there's a funny story. He's on the phone once for a long time with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, they're having difficulty in the conversation. Netanyahu won't get off of the fact that I was undermining him. And then President Obama says, no, he's not. So, and it's like 30 minutes where Netanyahu won't get off bitching about me to President. And President Obama's trying to get it to a different topic. So he finally said, look, I want to talk about other things, but let me just say this. Rahm's not trying to undermine you, but it didn't help when you publicly said he was a self-loathing Jew. And I had just, about a year earlier, returned from a trip where I took Zach, Amy and I, we took Zach and he got bar mitzvahed in Israel. He says, you know, calling him a self-loathing Jew probably wasn't the most helpful thing that said. No, so look, I think I have not, my view on this is in many ways, Israel has never been closer to what Ben Gurion thought of as a nation among nations. On the other hand, it's also never been farther apart. There is not a long-term solution of having another ethnic group in the boundaries of Israel that think of themselves, the Palestinians. You can't keep them in this status. It's not, the status quo is not sustainable over the long term. And members of the IDF and the national security apparatus say that. So I'm not saying anything they haven't said. Now, I will say, to Israel's credit, the Palestinians, I mean, there's an original quote by Abba Eban. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to make peace. And when you look at the history of both from 93, the Oslo agreements forward, they have had 5 separate chances to advance the cause of the Palestinian people. And they chose victimhood over. And the real difference when you go back to the founding fathers of Israel, Ben Gurion took less than half a loaf. The Palestinians won't even take a loaf. And you can't make peace if the other side don't want to be a partner. And I'm not saying Netanyahu or the Israeli governments over the long term have been the best of partners, but they have been at the table more than the other side. And but I do think Israel, at one level, both economically, culturally, militarily, is among the nation of nations. It faces an existential threat from Iran and what they're doing in Syria and in Lebanon. And Iran is a nefarious source of disorder. That said, Israel has to figure out, at least on the West Bank, and I think the Palestinians are coming to the conclusion after about another 2 months of not cooperating, that it's better to figure out how to figure a plan going forward.
To move forward. You know, during the campaign, staying on the world front, I had the honor to know virtually all the candidates except for 2, I think, and I spent time and talked to them. What I didn't get was clarity from a democratic perspective on our worldview and where America plays in that. It's more of a patchwork quilt. People were able to talk about issues, but not kind of. President Bush had this notion of freedom. I mean, you know, whether he was right or wrong, it was like, we're gonna just try to make everybody free, okay? And Trump was like, you know, to hell with my allies. I'm gonna kind of go alone. What is the gestalt of the Biden Democratic coalition about our place in the world, do you think, in this is what you agree with?
Well, my one is you can't separate foreign policy from domestic anymore. And it's not just about economics and stuff, but look, if America has never lost on 2 points. We've never lost when we've invested in America or Americans. That's what World War II showed. That's what, the space program showed. We don't lose. And we have to start making, China is not stopping us from investing in our infrastructure. China is not stopping us from investing in our education. China is not stopping us from sending more and more people to both post-high school education, whatever form it takes. That's us. And if we did that, we're going to be, I think the 3 things we got to do, we got 30%, 39% of Americans are college educated. We got to take it to 50, minimum. 2, we got to have it. If you want a 21st century economy, you're going to have a 21st century foundation and transportation and otherwise system. Second, we should have 3% of our GDP collectively as a country go into research and development. You do those 3, forget the tax code, forget a couple of those 3 things, you'll see because of the culture, the entrepreneurship, a country with laws will take off and America will still be America as we know it. Second, one of the big things that we should take from history, every time America's put a coalition together, it's won. Every time it's trying to go alone, it's lost. America in World War II fought in a coalition. Okay? In the Cold War with Europe, etc., America had a coalition and we beat communism. Mm-hmm. That's not true about Korea, Vietnam, and trying to do this alone. I do think, to tell you the truth, and one of the third things I would say is over the history since World War II forward, we overestimate the power of our opponents, our enemies. Right now, take a look at Russia. We think about Putin as a solid master. Belarus, he ran a campaign that he's a tool of Putin. He lost. Moldova, lost. Azerbaijan, lost. You don't want to be associated with Putin right now on the near border. He is not as strong, and he has massive in Ukraine, including Belarus, Moldova, massive problems. And he also has an economy that is not growing, and especially at $40 a barrel, not growing. He needs 60. China, well, the virus has shown us to be some major vulnerabilities. The virus, China took its mask off and showed that it is not a good neighbor. It doesn't know the good neighbor. Go ask Hong Kong, go ask India, go ask Australia right now. And everybody in that region does not want an unhinged China. Those are huge.
What do we do about China? I mean, the Uyghur Muslims are being in concentration.
Well, I think on China, my own view on China, this is a bigger topic and one you could spend hours on, is we have to become a stable countervailing force with using Australia, Japan, India, Korea. Vietnam wants to be a part of that, where we can collectively be part of a counterweight. They do not want to become dependent on China. They're not sure they can rely on us. We have to prove that we're a reliable ally.
We had that with the TPP, a former mayor of Dallas, Ron Kirk, who was U.S. trade rep, and I thought we were kind of putting the squeeze on him in that way. And then,
well, that's right. We did this go alone, and we're alone.
Yeah,
we got the alone part of go alone.
You know, I probably bounced over COVID. Let's spend just a moment on that.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would say? Let's not spend time on the White House anymore, about being mayors and governors. You know, what do you take a firm hand on this? You know, how do you look at this thing?
Well, I look at it because I think a couple things randomly. I think if you go back to the beginning, and I had a big fight with my brother who's in public health. I said, you're putting up a false dichotomy between life and livelihood. And you shouldn't do that, because for a lot of people, livelihood is a life and death decision, not just COVID. That's one. Two, I think as a country, we went all the way to the technology side, testing and tracing, and it's clear our public health systems were not ready for that. We should have started on the low tech side, mask, wash, distance, open space, especially in the summer, and used not 2 weeks, but a 1 month lockdown or limitation that would have gotten our hands around it, and then slowly, sector by sector of population, loosened up. The additional thing is that would have given us time to get the testing and tracing. I get tested every 7 days now. And the truth is, you couldn't have done that 7 months ago, but you can do it today. And had we done the math, all the things that we low tech early, which would have given us enough time to get the sea legs under the tech part, we would be in a different place. Now, my one thing today, given that it's back out of control, I'm trying to stay away from anything in Chicago, or I don't know enough about Dallas right now. But I would say I've read enough research. I think it's crazy that we're talking about restaurants and bars and kids are out of school. And I think there's a piece today in the Journal, and I've spent a lot of time looking at this. In school education is essential. And I attacked, and I know you came up and did our summer learning and replicated it, or did your own version of it.
No, we stole it from you. I'll say that.
You don't want this summer slide to become the COVID slide. And basically, for those that don't know it, a child in the summer, for every month they're out of school, loses 2 months of education. And, just in these, it's pretty clear kids that aren't going online, they're second grade, etc. Online is just not going to cut it. And if you got a child from poverty, they got enough in their lives that are headwinds. You don't need to add to this. And COVID is not spreading out of the school.
I read a bit in the last couple of days that kids are actually safer in school.
Yeah, there's a whole host of, from nutrition, domestic violence, that they are not the spreaders, and schools are not super spreader moments. Get kids in school. Just get them there. I think there's a lot of other things you can then do to help the parent. Now, that's one. Two, and I'm hoping they do this in the stimulus, beyond giving people checks of sustenance, and I think they should be done both for cities, states, etc. This is an opportunity. The number one part of the economy hit is retail. It's one of the entry points for women of color. And a lot of those jobs, retail is going to go through a revolution. It's been accelerated, are not coming back. We know today, home healthcare, cybersecurity, computer coding, advanced manufacturing, you can get a certificate in 6 months and be fully capable of earning $80,000, $90,000 a year.
Right.
And I would say, we're going to give you unemployment. We're going to give you another $600 a month or week additional, and we'll pay for the entire 6 month certificate only if you complete, not if you don't. So you have an incentive, and ensure that the 7 million people come out of this, and if they do, we do, stronger, better prepared to pay for their and sustain their families a middle class life with a skill set. And you don't need 4 years, you don't need 2 years. You can do this in 6 months, every one of those fields or more. The second thing is, you and I both know as mayors, there's X amount of costs in an infrastructure project just coming from working around people that are using the road, using the train, using the airport. Well, given there's very little traffic, we should be like putting our foot to the metal, to the pedal, because you will save a tremendous amount of money because you don't have to work around the traveler.
Right.
And I would be beyond the sustaining level, I would be rapidly upgrading our roads, our rails, our runways, in that, and then the skill set. And if you do that, while COVID will have been a major hit on America, we have the chance of coming out of this, as President-elect Biden says, stronger.
Yeah,
And to
hopefully,
me, those are the type of things
yeah.
I would do.
hopefully an infrastructure bill can get through, because it's everybody you talk to seems to want it, and it's something we should be able to come together with. Hey, we're coming to a close, but let me kind of end philosophically and ask you what your hope for the world is. I mean, as you sit back, you're getting to my age, and we're kind of looking at, sitting on the porch and looking at the world and saying, I sure hope the world does
Look,
this.
I think, you know, at one level, we have major challenges. They can't be met alone, in the sense of COVID, climate change, other viruses that are going to be coming, terrorism. America should be confident enough and strong enough to welcome China. I think it should be stricter about, if you're going to be in, you got to be in at all levels. You can't kind of cheat like you have been. And I look at it and I think that as a former mayor, you have a unique opportunity to think globally, but to really be intense about it locally. And while these are challenging times, they're not here permanently. And the
So
real
what's your hope? What's your hope? That
Well,
we figure out?
my hope, my real hope is that, and I can't but leave away from the last 4 years. My real hope is that we try to get past this tribalism.
Great.
And find our common humanity. I'm a big reader, so I've used the last. I read a book every 3 weeks. I've been doing it ever since college, and I don't know why, but at least in the last year, I really accelerated my Lincoln reading. There's a great book called Lincoln on the Verge. It's about his 13 days from Springfield to Washington, D.C., and how he begins to find the words and etc. And I'm just reading now Lincoln in His Times. It's a cultural study of how Lincoln reflects that. And you know, we've always had tribalism. We've always had divisions, whether they're on class, race, or faith. Our great presidents are the ones that find our common language, not just our better angels, but the common language that allows us to look past certain identifiers to our humanity. Yeah. And so my great hope is that we get past this tribalist moment.
And as you said early on, it's contingent on each of us to do that ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think
is important.
If I said to you, Mike, I think one of the things I learned as mayor, and I really found my groove towards the end, and it was not too late. Just I wish I thought about it more. We don't challenge people to be the citizens we need them to be for government to work. Yes. We take on this huge responsibility. Yes, we're accountable. Yes, but everybody says, "What's Joe Biden going to do?" What's Joe Biden? Well, what are we going to do?
What are you going to do?
And since we started there, let me end. I think President Kennedy struck it right. We owe, as citizens, something to not our government, but our country. And so we got to call forth from all of us something a little more, because I really think America's special. It was special for my family.
Well, that's what makes you special. And I'll tell you, I just want to underline what you said, because I had wrote it down in my note. It's apropos for this, Jim Falk, is think globally and act locally, and to try to break down those. So thanks so much for talking to this audience. And
thanks, guys.
I want to thank both of you. And I don't see either one of you sitting on a porch. And Mayor Emanuel, I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you read your brother's book?
Okay, I'm gonna give you absolute truth. Ready?
Yep.
I have never read a book about President Clinton. Never read a book about President Obama or his time, and I've never read a book about the Emanuels.
Well, I read Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel's book, and in fact, it was a wonderful book about which country has the world's best health system. And you can catch it on YouTube, our DFW World channel. Mike Rawlings, congratulations. I'm so glad that you helped to make this inaugural lecture.
Can I say one other thing, Jim?
Sure.
Can I say? Okay. I want all the people of Dallas to know, I think you know this. Mike Rawlings, we worked a lot on education. We looked on riverfront. This was a guy every day that wanted to learn and then adapt whatever he saw there. And he had an enthusiasm. He wore Dallas every day. Every day. You couldn't, and I loved because it was a friendly competition. He would tell me how much better Dallas was than Chicago. And I would actually turn the volume down when he was talking.
Well, we know that he's missed.
He's a great guy.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Be safe.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
Thank you.